two things jump out to me, and I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on it. One, I think there's a certain paradox here, isn't there? We're talking about the age of, digital disruption, digital transformation, yet Microsoft has acquired an organization whose fundamental asset is human capital, right?
Well, their asset isn't human capital, it's data about people. And the issue with data about people that is self-reported, say what you like about the acknowledgement system, is that we've got to really be cautious in expecting it to be entirely objective, right? Because there's going to be inevitable subjectivity there. So I think what we need to look at, and it's a lesson for HR, it's a lesson for organizations in every respect, and that is the use of data and the effective use of data and analytics that's respectful of truth as opposed to interest, right? So if we look at the value of data today, Ginny Rometty, our CEO at IBM, has been saying for some time that this is the next natural resource. The data is the 21st century natural resource. The point about that is that natural resources are a very, very high value, but typically they take some mining to derive that value, right? You're not really walking down the street picking up diamonds. You have to mine for them and you have to refine them to make sure that they have a value. And that is indeed what gets you revenue in return. So similarly with data, we've got to be really, really circumspect about what can we truly take from that data? What is the value of that data? And it's not like I'm going to go and mine for diamonds and deliver gold. And if we're not looking very objectively at what truth there is in that data and what we can reasonably expect as an outcome from the data that we're looking at, we can be taken down the wrong path. So, I saw a deck at a conference recently where somebody showed the fantastic correlation between something like marmalade sales and GDP or something like that, right? Now, naturally, when GDP is going up, everything probably is selling a bit more. So that is it causal? Is it a relationship? Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It's not insight. It's not an actionable insight that we're taking that we should expect to make more marmalade when the economy is strong. So from a human and a talent perspective, we similarly have to start controlling for what is true as opposed to what's interesting when we start to look at the analytics of what predict performance. And I think that brings us back to what we said earlier about diversity of thought and stuff like that. If we can't find measures that actually truthfully talk to the topic that we're assessing, we can't evaluate performance against them and we can't derive value from that analysis or indeed the actions that come as a result.
My point about human capital was that, and suddenly, when you think about it in this light, maybe the price doesn't seem so absurd. Data might be the new natural resource, but there's all kinds of data. But the data that LinkedIn offers you is not data that you can easily replicate. It is the story of our lives as individuals in the workplace, aggregated, therefore created by each individual person putting a stitch in the fabric to create that fabric that is LinkedIn. It's not easily replicated as opposed to, say, business data or a number of sales and so on, which you can then aggregate against your competitor and against the marketplace and so on. You can acquire that data. This data and therefore whoever owns that data is quite valuable, I would argue, and I'd like to get your thoughts on that. And my second follow-on question from that is, if you start to make diamonds out of my data, might I not feel a little bit perturbed and say, you know what, I'm no longer going to contribute my data to this place? Indeed, I should say, I was doing some research and writing an article on this acquisition, and in the process of writing it, I had an email, interesting from an IBM, inviting me to an alternative to LinkedIn called Branded.me. Branded Me,
yeah.
Right? So our people say, oh, let's move. And if we move, then that data become, in theory, loses its value. Am I making some sense?
Absolutely, and I think that there are a couple of points I want to make in that area. One is first of all, I think there may be some other motivations for Microsoft buying there. I think they've looked across at Facebook and Google with their networks. They've also seen what they've started to do with their platforms in terms of generating sales and other revenue streams, and that some of the paradigms may be shifting in the technology world. So I think that there's an element of a future bet there in terms of Microsoft's business. What you're buying is, LinkedIn has always been predominantly a professional business network. I think the second point is quite interestingly, I worked on the LinkedIn advisory board, so they had a customer board in EMEA in terms of that. And behind the scenes, they are very conscious of the point about protecting membership and giving value to the membership, because that's the most valuable resource. And they absolutely recognise that. I think the danger of all acquisitions is that thinking going to continue, and is there any danger of people moving on to other platforms? We've seen this certainly in the younger generation. So if you're in possession of a teenager or two teenagers, you'll know that if you want to communicate with them, talking on Snapchat and Instagram is actually a quite good way of getting their attention, or WhatsApp in terms of that. But there are more likely tools to get a response from your teenager. But you see these social trends, and when you're working in areas in talent acquisition, one of the problems you're having to do is explain to them that this year, yes, we've put all our money in Facebook and that's working, but this year, we're taking all that money and no, I want to reinvest and I want to go to Snapchat this year. Why? Because the market's moved. And it'll be interesting to see whether people can develop platforms and what the engagement strategy is going to be around that sort of going forward. So I think those are the 2 points in terms of that from social media. Will they make the best out of that asset?
I think there's a lot of, there's other speculation about values and shareholdings that their employees had, and other organizations moves away from similar financial structures, because there's been a huge amount of pressure on LinkedIn in recent years financially, and actually, if measured in raw terms, they've been on decline. So this is part of the cycle of the conversation, which is, earlier we were saying, where's the next competitor coming from, right? So did people anticipate Uber or not? And what did we actually learn about Uber? Well, Uber's now rating the passengers as much as the passengers rate the driver. Similarly, there are hotel chains in Australia where you can get a discount on your next visit if you allow them to put a rating into the system on you, which tells them whether or not you deserve the discount when you come back. Do you need a cleaner? Do you not need a cleaner? But I think that that's not... It sounds novel, but it's not new. I mean, it was how long ago that IKEA said, well, we just won't put the thing together for you, do that for yourselves and you'll save some cash, right? There's this piece about it's just the general diversifying of power and control of any and every part of our lives that we're seeing. But the issue with that is that then it is sort of the buyer's market, and if you're saying that you're going to be the optimal experience for individuals, you need to remain the optimal experience. And what we're finding with LinkedIn is, on the one hand, what's quite useful for some people is they're getting far more approaches because there's far more targeted marketing by recruiters looking for passive candidates, because LinkedIn's got their data, but you've also got the backlash from recruiters saying, how can I trust anything that LinkedIn says necessarily? And that's not to suggest the average person is lying intentionally, but simply because over time, it's impossible to tell the truth from the rest in what's recorded on LinkedIn. So increasingly, the competitors that are coming into that market are doing so with increased objectivity or multi-rater solutions against predefined criteria of success, and the individuals themselves need to have been evaluated as having a skill before they can give other people the credit for the skill. Things like that. And I think that's because there's a different consumer need. So on the one hand, LinkedIn may have gone first in the professional space, like Facebook may have gone first in some other spaces. That doesn't make them immune to a huge amount of competition where people build on their idea and actually make it more powerful to particular market segments, or indeed ultimately perhaps a broader segment.